Hello everyone, today I have another video for you. Today I'm going to be going over Viktor's items, runes, and summoner spells for Season 12. I do also have a little bit of a challenge at the end, so if anyone wants to stick around until then to try that, let me know how they like it. I do also have an older video where I went over items, runes, summoner spells in a similar manner. I think the item math is very relevant from that video still. It tells you when you want to go Ludens and Leandries a little more specifically, and it also goes over the math of pen. The only real big difference between then and now is Shadow Flame, since there's a new magic pen item. You can deal essentially true damage up to 115 magic resist with Shadow Flame and Ludens and Sorks and as much pen as you can get. It's just a little awkward with Shadow Flame pen being health based and shield based. But the link to that video will be down below here. First off, I'm going to go over itemization. So there's essentially 4 mythics you want to go on Viktor: Leandries, Ludens, Crown, and Everfrost. Also, I'm going to preface this. There's a bunch of little oddball things you could do on Viktor. For example, I've seen people go Grasp of the Undying into Aurelia, or Divine Sunder, or Riftmaker. I'm not going to go over those super niche things because I don't think they're incredibly relevant. I'm going to go over the stuff that's going to help you 98% of the time. So I'd say I go Leandries most often. I would say I've been going Ludens a little more often lately, but I would say I go Crown and Everfrost a little more than Ludens still. I don't think Crown is an every game thing. I think it is very situational. But for Leandries, I think you can never really go wrong with Leandries. If you're ever unsure of what to buy, you can just go Leandries and it'll never really be wrong. There's just potentially an option that's slightly better. So you're going to be looking for Leandries whenever they have high HP targets. Again, this isn't an absolute. You don't just go Leandries the moment you see an Ornn. It depends about the rest of the team comp. It's a whole picture thing, not just an individual champion thing. But yeah, HP stackers like Scion, Ornn, and the reason I put Malzahar here is because Leandries ticks for 4 seconds after you've hit them with an ability. And Malzahar's spell shield doesn't start recharging until he stops taking damage. Exact same as Crown. So Leandries is actually really good into Crown because it gives you an extra 4 seconds after you've hit them with an ability before it starts recharging. I'd say Ludens you generally want to go when any of the other options don't make sense. So if they can pop Crown too easily like Xerath, Ziggs, if they're too far range as well for Everfrost to be useful, or if they don't really have a single person who builds HP on their team, but generally that's not the case. Most of the time people will be building HP, but if that's the situation, then you can go Ludens. I put Ahri here because of the movement speed from Ludens. It does actually help dodging her charm, keeping that outplay potential there. For Crown, I think it's pretty obvious. You're going to go Crown against champions where they can't necessarily pop it incredibly easily, or you absolutely need it to survive. For example, Fizz. Fizz, the only way he can pop Crown is if he goes to Q or auto attack you. If he hits you with Shark, the actual application of the Shark won't pop it. The pop-up of the ground of the Shark will. So even if he hits you with a max range Shark, you're still pretty okay. Same with Qiyana. She does have a little bit of an easier time popping it since she has a ranged Q, but you know exactly when they're going to be going in. The moment that Crown is popped, you know in the next 2 to 10 seconds, they're probably going to be going on you. Same with Zed. Even though he has a much easier time popping it, it gives you that whole buffer. If he's going to go on you, you know he has to pop Crown first, and if he doesn't, then you're totally fine. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but Everfrost actually does go through Yasuo's Wind Wall. Same with Samira Wind Wall, I guess, whatever it's called. It goes through, it doesn't count as a projectile, it just counts as a straight-up attack. Same with Tryndamere and Diana. It's actually really good into these champs, into short-range, hard-engaged champs. The reason I like it into Tryndamere is because anytime he spins on you, he's going in an exact straight line, so you know exactly where he's going to be, so you just pop Everfrost the moment he tries to spin on you, Gravity Field immediately, and if you do it fast enough, he won't be able to Gale Force out of it. He will be able to flash out of it, but he won't be able to Gale Force. The actual Gravity Field stun will stop since it interrupts dashes, and if you get it down fast enough, it will stop that. Same with Diana. If you do Everfrost her Gravity Field immediately, it forces her to either Zonya's, so she doesn't have it for her ultimate, or it stops her from getting that double E dash to your backline where she gets the 3-man ultimate and demolishes your whole entire team. So next up, I'm going to go over item orders. Again, this is going to cover you 95% of the time for the most part. So I'm either starting Doran's Ring, Health Pot, or Corrupting Potion, and generally when I go Corrupting Potion, I'm going Time Warp Tonic in the Inspiration Tree, but not all the time. There's some matchups like Syndra, for example, or Xerath. I don't think you need the Time Warp Tonic, but I do think you need the Corrupting Potion. And I'm almost always starting Yellow Trinket. There are very few situations where you could potentially start Red Trinket if you want to get level 2 on the first wave, but I don't think that's super important for Viktor. So on your first back, if you did go Doran's Ring, you're going to be looking for some combination of these. I generally don't go double Dorans, but you're going to be looking for some combination of these 4. If you did start corrupting, I'm looking for Dorns in my first back. You can even get a tier and just sit on that for most of the game, but ideally you want the Lost Chapter. And I'm going to go over this a little later, but I do like Futures Market because it takes only, if you're CSing decently, it takes 1120 gold on your first back to be able to get Lost Chapter, which is a huge power spike for Viktor. Being able to spam lasers off cooldown is always massive. And you want to be thinking about your gold value and what you can get and how you can maximize that. For example, if you have 1,000 gold, you can get Sapphire, Boots, and Dark Seal to spend exactly that 1,000, or you could potentially get double Amp Tome and a Control Ward if you really need that Control Ward. It's always situational. Think, do they have a jungler like a Rengar who can't gank me till 6? Or do they have some super aggressive jungler like a Lee Sin who can actually gank me early? Do you need that Control Ward vision or not? And then sometimes you do want to go Boots before your Lost Chapter. You want to rush Boots sometimes, going directly from here to here. The only times I would really do that is if I need Merc Treads. So if I'm up against a Zoe or Syndra champions that Merc Treads are massive into, that just screw up their entire timing, especially on Zoe. Because when he hits Bubble, he's so used to that specific timing of people not having Merc Treads that it gives you control of your character that little bit faster so he doesn't hit that max range Q. Same with Leona, it messes up their timing on their combos. And then you're going to generally be looking for your Mythic, whatever the game state dictates, that's what you're going to be going. And one trick I've been doing before level 9, before I can switch to my blue trinket, is I've been swapping from yellow to sweeper if I've just used both my wards, because the cooldown on yellow trinket is anywhere from 2 to 4 minutes. For the early levels of the game, it's around 3 minutes. And the cooldown on sweeper is going to be early, whenever you switch to it, it's going to be 0 seconds to 30 seconds, around there, 30, 40 seconds. So instead of not having anything for 3 minutes, you can just recall, if you're already recalling, and then swap to this if you've just placed the 2 wards, or you can plan for that. You could place the 2 wards just before you back, and then switch to sweeper, and then potentially switch to wards back on another recall if you're not level 9 and you've already used this. And again, please do not forget to buy control wards. I would rather you have a bad habit of buying too many control wards than not enough. Ideally, you don't want to do either of those, but I would prefer you to buy too many. The amount of times I see people with 0 control wards in their entire game is disgusting. And this is in Diamond 2 Elo. People still don't buy control wards. It's kind of nasty. If you ever don't really know when to buy your control wards, you think, is there an objective coming up, or do I really need the vision, or can I defend the vision? You don't want to just place a control ward to give the enemy free gold and XP, where you waste 75 for no reason at all. Put it a little bit more in a defensive situation where you can actually hold it and contest it if they do try to fight you over it, or save it for a dragon or baron fight. And now 2 items that you can generally sit on, I didn't add that as well, but you could sit on tier as well. If you want to sit on Oblivion Orb, sit on Stopwatch, buying these items even back here, rushing them potentially, like Oblivion Orb rush into a Silas, for example, is pretty good. Or even sometimes a Stopwatch rush. If you could get Lost Chapter and Stopwatch, that might not be too bad a buy into a Zed. Or even a Fizz. But just think about these things. I don't think enough of Victors generally build these. You don't have to full complete the item yet, or don't have to full complete the item at all in the game. These are just very good items. Same with tier. You can get tier, you don't have to full complete your Seraphs, you can just sit on the tier. It's a good chunk of mana for most of the game. Now I think there's 2-3 paths after that. You can either go the passive build, not passive, but I'd say the most defensive build, which is either Zhonya's or Banshees, depending on the game state. I'd say the mid aggression build, which is Cosmic Drive and Lichbane, and I'd say the most aggressive, which is Shadow Flame. I think it depends on the game state, of course. All of these depend on the game state. I don't generally go Cosmic Drive or Lichbane second. I will sometimes go Shadow Flame, but generally I'm going for the Zhonya's Banshees. I think the Shadow Flame is probably the best if you're trying to like 1v9 carry a game. But generally, you're going to have teammates who are semi-competent, and you'll have one other person who's hopefully good on your team, where you can actually build this defensive route and look for potentially Shadow Flame after. And if I did go this route, or even this route, I'm going to be looking for one of these items. If I did get a Dark Seal, I have 8, 10 stacks. I have Flash. I'm going to probably get a Magi's, but Magi's isn't an every game thing. You're generally going to be looking for one of these two. And then, so if they have 50 MR or above, the Void Staff is going to do more damage than the Death Cap here. If they have 50 MR, same with Shadow Flame, it's going to do more damage than Shadow Flame, but Shadow Flame's a little tricky because you get max pen when they're at 1000 HP or below, or if they've been shielded. So Shadow Flame isn't generally good into high HP targets unless they have a lot of shields for you to get that max pen. But even in those situations, Void Staff still does just about the same, if not slightly more. So 50 MR above, and think about the whole thing, because there might be one person on their team who has like 90 MR and then the rest have like their 38 MR or whatever it may be. think about what target you're going to be hitting or what target you have to deal with in the team fight. And obviously around level 9, 10, switch to your blue trinket. Don't forget that. That's fantastic on Viktor. Not enough people build it, but I think it's pretty standard. And then if you are in that situation, I wouldn't if I did grab an Oblivion back here, and I'm in a situation where I do need a Morello, I would complete this maybe 5th or 6th. If I have like a Soraka, a Yuumi, an Aurelia, some kind of really big healing target, and my team doesn't have a Chemtech Putrefier or something of that nature. I'm not completing Morello very often though. And I do just want to go over, sometimes you might want to go Void Staff second item, like right after your Mythic, go directly to Void Staff. If the enemy team is all stacking armor, like let's say you have 3 magic damage dealers on your team. You're up against like a Corky mid who has a Hex Drinker, a Yi jungle who has a Wit's End, a Volibear top who has a Force of Nature or something crazy like that. Definitely look for the Void Staff second, because that's the most damage you could possibly deal if you don't need the defensive. But sometimes you do need that damage because you'll just be tickling the people for the most part if you don't have that. Next, I'm going to go over Rune Pages. So I think there's 3 base Rune Pages and then a couple little variations on them. So my favorite standard Rune Page would be Airy, Mana Flow, Transcendence, Scorch, and I love Futures Market. And the Cosmic Insight is dependent on if I'm going Time Warp Tonic with Corrupting Potion or not. I think Airy is always a safe bet. I don't go Phase Rush very often, but when I do go Phase Rush, I always switch to Gathering Storm as well. I love Phase Rush into someone like a Nasus, for example, because anytime he withers you, you just hold your Phase Rush until he withers you. And then the moment he withers you, you get that Q Auto Waft laser and you just kite the duration of wither, and since you get the 75% slow resist, it's totally fantastic into him. And then if he flashes after you, you flash away, you just match flash for flash and phase rush to wither, and you could easily kite him with Leandries. I'm not a big fan of Biscuits. I love Futures Market. Biscuits, I think, do have their use, but I don't think you need Biscuits. I think there's always a way to play around mid lane where you don't need Biscuits, because that Futures Market Lost Chapter buy is such a massive power spike on Viktor. It's insane. And then the Time Warp Tonic, I will switch Cosmic Insight for Time Warp Tonic and go Corrupting Potion into matchups like Yasuo, Aurelia, anyone that I really need that early movement speed, even a Yone, where you can be cutting that little bit of movement speed, or someone else who's also going a Corrupting Potion, you feel like you need to match it. Like, you don't need to match a Kassadin, but I like going Corrupting Potion and Time Warp into someone like Kassadin, potentially even a Fizz or Echo. It gives you that little burst of movement speed. I always go attack speed, I always go adaptive, and then I go armor or MR, depending on the matchup. And next, I'm going to go over Resolve Second Tree. I do like this generally into LeBlanc, but one thing you could also do into LeBlanc is go Nullifying Orb instead of Mana Flow. The only problem with this is you'd have to get a tier to make up for not having Mana Flow, which is a choice. You could decide to go Mana Flow and just grab a Null Magic Mantle, which is 450, or go Nullifying Orb and then grab a tier, which is 400, and then you also get to have the Shield Bash Bone Plating. The only problem is you do have to give up the Inspiration Second Tree, which is unfortunate in some situations. And generally when I am going against LeBlanc and I don't have Cosmic Insight, I don't like going TP when I don't have Cosmic Insight. I feel like the cooldown's way too long. This is also good in champions like the Yone, but again, I've been preferring the Time Warp Tonic a lot more lately. And First Strike. I personally am not a big fan of First Strike. I don't think there's very many situations you could go First Strike or need to go First Strike. The only times I think you should go First Strike is if Airy makes no sense, if you have 0 kill pressure or the poke is irrelevant against them early. For example, against a Ryze, Yone, I think those champions going First Strike isn't too bad. Or you could go Phase Rush. I think the only times you ever need to go First Strike is if you're debating between Phase Rush or First Strike, which isn't very often. And whenever I do go First Strike, Boots or Stopwatch, both are fine depending on the situation, and then I'm just about always going Futures Market and then Time Warp or Cosmic depending on the matchup. And then Second Tree, I'm generally going Mana Flow Transcendence and then changing the armor MR depending on the matchup. But the thing about First Strike, I don't think it's a very good early game room. It's not bad early, but I think it's way better once you get to 2-3 items. So I think it's more of a mid game rune. Since you're dealing more damage, you're getting more gold. Early on, one of your combos are going to deal, 150 damage. You're going to get like 8 gold for the trade. Instead of later on when you're dealing 1,000 damage for a combo, you're going to be getting 100 gold for that. And it's going to be a lot more significant. It helps you get to that full build faster once you've gotten a couple items locked down. Next, I'm going to go over Summoner Spells. So I think you can never really go wrong with Flash TP. I think if you're in lower elo though, you shouldn't go TP if you don't think you're going to use it properly. I think you should generally go Barrier or Ghost, and don't go Ghost Barrier, go Flash Barrier or Flash Ghost. You're not going these two. I always go Flash every single game. I think Ghost is actually very, very good for lower elo players because it helps you navigate team fights and fix your positioning problems a lot easier. You just pop Ghost at the start of a team fight, potentially just before you get a kill, or if you need to reposition or you need to get to a fight faster since you've rotated slowly. Pop that Ghost, don't be scared to use it, especially with Cosmic Insight. That cooldown on Ghost is so short. And then Barrier into matchups like LeBlanc, like the Fizz, like the Kiana, anyone who has really, really scary 100-0 potential. And then the next, I think these are a little situational. I don't go cleanse very often, and I would only really go cleanse into if they had like a Lissandra mid and an Elise jungle, or maybe Ashe bot lane with also a Lissandra mid and an Eve jungle. Something where I need that cleanse to survive, where they have super, super easy pick potential, even a Morgana maybe. And then the exhaust, I'm going into auto attackers mostly. I don't think it's very good. It's not bad into Kiana, champions like Kiana and Talon, but it is difficult to get the timing right since they do have stealth. You have to be on point with those exhausts, getting them the moment they appear or just before they go stealth. I prefer it into champions like Aurelia, Yasuo, champions who are auto attack based and very committed. Once they go in, you know they're in, there's no way out. It's not too bad into Zed either, but it depends on how confident you are in your exhaust to go Barrier or exhaust into Zed. And 2 summoner spells I don't go often at all is Ignite Heal, but they do have some merits. I think Ignite into champions like a Sylas or a Fizz, or even a Kiana if you want to be aggressive. Fizz and Kiana you can abuse levels 1 and 2, but once they hit level 3, those champions get incredibly scary for Viktor. I think levels 1 and 2 you have a serious advantage into someone like a Fizz and Kiana, but then from 3 to 6, or from 3 until you get Crown Zhonya's, you're kind of screwed for the most part. So if you want to try and punish, get that early kill to help yourself accelerate that build, that's something you could do. And I would only go heal if I'm duo with my jungle, for example, and I just have extreme confidence in my jungle because it helps that 2v2 skirmish potential so much more. You're able to debate the enemy team, the enemy jungle mid 2v2 with a heal because they never expect that extra health coming through. It's like, imagine bot lane, one of the people had TP and the other team had heal. If they actually try to commit to an all-in fight, and being down a full combat summoner is just game-changing. So I'm going to do a little bit of a test here. I want you guys to tell me what rune page you're going to go. I'm going to show you a couple team comps here. I want you to tell me what rune page you're going to go, what summoner spells you would go, what boots you would go, what mythic you would go, and then what your next 2 items after your mythic would be. Of course, it would be dependent on the game state, what they build, but I want you to take a general approach of what you would be building in that situation. Don't factor in something like a Medjai's if you were snowballing, but you can potentially say I would go Deathcap or Void Staff depending on if they built this much MR or not, or if this target had MR. And think about how the game is going to play out, not just your lane matchup, think about the entire big picture of how this game is going to be played. So first off, your team would be Jace, Diana, you being mid Viktor, Twitch, Karma support, and then Kench, Zed, Corki, Ezreal, Ziggs. Pause now, take a moment to actually think about it. Give it good thought and truly write it down if you want to. Write it in the comments if you want to before I tell you the answer and see if you're right. Give you a couple seconds here. 3, 2, 1. So you might be tempted to go Crown because you see the Zed and you're very worried about the Zed, but I think Crown gets popped way too easily by these 3 that it's going to be on cooldown most of the time. One big factor here is I think you really need to worry about the Jace into Kench matchup. Jace cannot match Kench later. So I think you absolutely need to go Liandry's. I think you absolutely need to go TP Flash because you're the only one who can deal with this Tahm Kench in a side lane later, while Jace will be able to demolish the Corki later. I think I would go Sorks here. For sure Sorks. Merc Treads don't really make any sense. They don't really have any hard CC. It's Kench stun, that's kind of it, and then a couple slows. So Sorks, Liandry's, I would definitely be going Zhonya's after that though, because there's still a Zed on the enemy team and you do have to worry about him. And then after that, depending on what Kench is building or the rest of their team is building, Deathcap if I can get it. I think Deathcap over Shadowflame is always going to be better if you can get it, but it depends on your gold value. Like if you have that 1800, 1900 gold and you have a needlessly large rod already, you can spend that 1750 for a Shadowflame if an incredibly important team fight's coming up. Like let's say you have just enough gold for Shadowflame and Dragon's up in 20 seconds. You're probably going to want to buy that Shadowflame if it's a very important Dragon fight. Or if nothing's happening, you could buy another needlessly large rod and wait till you have Deathcap. If I can wait for Deathcap, I will. If not, I'm buying the Shadowflame. And then again, like I said, if they have above 50 MR, I'm going Void Staff. Next up, Fiora, Nocturne, Yu, Vayne, Yumi versus Sion, Kiana, Fizz, Lucian, Leona. Again, think about the big picture, think about what your role is in the game, and think about how this game would be played out. 3, 2, 1. So I think this is absolutely a crown game. You might be tempted to go Leandries because you see the Scion and the Leona. But you need to think you have a Vayne and you have a Fiora, two very, very high scaling, high damage targets who will be able to deal with these targets incredibly easily. So your goal is going to be to just survive the Kiana and the Fizz and just not let them snowball off you. That's the biggest thing, and because you guys outscale them absolutely. So if you get to that late game state, you'll be definitely winning those team fights. So I think the build here, I think, by the way, oh, I didn't tell you the rune page for the last build, for the last one. I totally forgot about that. This would be an Airy and a Cosmic Insight, not Time Warp Tonic, by the way. And then same with this one, I would say this is an Airy, and this one I would say is also Cosmic Insight, not Time Warp Tonic, just to keep that summoner spells up as much as often. I would also go Barrier Flash here, just again, to try and stop that deletion from these two champions. You have Fiora who's going to be able to match Scion easily, so you don't necessarily need the TP to match the sideline later. Fizz is almost never going to go TP, so if you're in a sideline against him, it's generally going to make your team have a 4v4, and I think your team wins this 4v4 if they don't play like apes. So Boots, Sorks, Mythic, Crown. Next item I think is absolutely Zhonya's. They have both a Kiana and a Fizz, like I said. Being able to Zhonya's Fizz Shark is massive. Being able to Zhonya's Kiana ult is also massive. And then after that, I would be leaning, again, more towards a Death Cap or a Void Staff. Shadow Flame is an option, but I think they have a big HP stacker here, a pretty tanky person here. So you're only really going to be building your item for these three. So if Kiana doesn't have a Hex Drinker or Fizz didn't go Banshees, Fizz generally like to go Zhonya's, or he didn't go Hex Drinker as well, then I'm probably going to try and look for that Death Cap if I can. If not, obviously, like I said earlier, get the Shadow Flame. If you have to get the Shadow Flame for a very game-changing fights coming up, just get the Shadow Flame. Take it, bite the bullet, do it. Next is Malphite, Lee Sin, Yu, Kai'Sa, and Thresh versus Sylas, Sejuani, Lissandra, Ashe, and Morgana. Again, think about this lane matchups, think about the team fights, think about the side laning, how it's all going to play out. 3, 2, 1. So I think the rune page here is going to be Airy, and I think it's going to be, again, another Cosmic Insight game, not Time Warp Tonic. The only reason I think you would go Time Warp Tonic is if you want to lane swap with the Malphite to match the Sylas, since Malphite gets absolutely demolished by the Sylas. So you could call for, hey, Malphite, let me go top lane, let you go middle, just survive the lane, and you can go Time Warp Tonic if you're against the Sylas. I think you'll need it if you're in a long lane, and I think it's very good. But if not, I think it's Cosmic Insight. I think your summoner spells this game would absolutely be Cleanse, Flash. I think they have so much here that you have to worry about for Cleanse. They have a bunch of point and click abilities that are just unavoidable. Oh god, what did I do? There we go. They have too many point and clicks. You're going to have to match the Sylas late game, and he's probably going to have teleport since Malphite just gets absolutely clapped by him. But I still think you need that cleanse because they have so much pick potential of Ashe Arrow, Morgbind, Sejuani, and then Lissandra could just claw over a wall and ult you. So I think your boots, you could potentially go Merc Treads this game, even with cleanse. I think it'd be okay. So I think Merc Treads would be a good buy here. Merc Treads and Sorks are both fine. I didn't go over CDR boots. I don't go CDR boots very often. The only times I do go CDR boots is if their entire team is like, they have 3 to 4 big tanky people, and Sorks are irrelevant. I would go CDR boots Leandries and just look for the poke damage with the Leandries burn against the HP stackers. So I think Mythic, Summoner Spells, Airy, and then Time Warp Tonic or Corrupting Potion, depending on if you want to call for a lane swap and Malphite agrees or not. Runes, Cleanse, Flash. Boots, Merc Treads, and Sorks, both fine. Mythic, absolutely Leandries. They have a Sejuani and a Lissandra, both build HP items. Sejuani is going to be a very big problem because you don't really have a super good tank shredder. Kai'Sa, yes, but you don't have a really great tank shredder, and none of the other options make sense. I think Crown gets popped too easily. I think Everfrost is okay, but they have Morgana Black Shield to stop it, which is kind of annoying. And then Ludens, I don't think it makes sense here. I think your second item would actually be Banshee's Veil this game. They have so much pick potential that even with Merc Treads and Cleanse, I think they can get to you very, very easily still. Ashe Volley pops your Banshees and then you're kind of screwed. Even if you have Cleanse, it's still a little screwy. So getting the Banshees, the Merc Treads, and the Cleanse all on top of each other stops you from just getting blindly Ashe Arrowed and from Fog of War, or blindly Sejuani ulted from Fog of War. You can go Zonyas if you think you'll have the reaction time, but I think being able to match the Silas, the MR will be incredibly useful, and then the Banshee's active will be also very useful. And then again, next item, probably Shadow Flame, Void Staff, Death Cap, depending on how much MR they're building. I would assume Void Staff this game because they do have a Sejuani who's an incredibly tanky target. I didn't talk about the 5th and 6th items a little bit. I did kind of talk about them, but you're generally going to look for the other, whatever you didn't go. If you went Death Cap, if you went Boots, Liandry's, Banshees, and then you went Void Staff in that situation, I'm looking for either Shadow Flame, Death Cap next, maybe even Lichbane if the team comp's short enough, but generally Death Cap, Shadow Flame, or whatever the other option is from the one I built. So if I built Death Cap, I'm going to look for Void Staff, Shadow Flame. If they don't have the MR for Void Staff, I'm probably grabbing Shadow Flame. If they still don't have any MR, I'm probably getting Lichbane last. If they do have MR, Void. And vice versa, you went Death Cap. They're still not building MR, look for Shadow Flame, and so on and so on. So let me know how you guys did on this. Do I have another? I think I have one more, yeah. So this is the last one I have for you guys. Ornn, Graves, Viktor, Jinx, Brand versus Kennen, Hecarim, Yasuo, Kai'Sa, and Blitz. Take a moment, think. 3, 2, 1. Pause if you need to. So I think this is an airy Time Warp Tonic game for sure. You're up against the Yasuo. You're going to definitely need that Time Warp Tonic for a lane. Boots, I think Merc Treads are totally, I think Sorks are totally fine here. The only stun they really have is Kennen. They do have Hecarim, Fear, and Blitz Silence, but I think Zhonya's is going to be enough for that. So Boots, Sorks, Mythic, I think is going to be Everfrost this game. I love Everfrost into both Yasuo and Hecarim. Yasuo, obviously, because it goes through Windwall, and they have a bunch of hard engage. They have literally everybody on their team is hard engage, semi-short range. Kennen's going to be trying to fly into your team, Rocket Belt, flash in with ult. If you can Everfrost and stop him from getting your team, same with Hecarim. If he's charging in, if you hit him with that Everfrost slow, his damage is going to be reduced. Yasuo, same thing. When he's ulting a target, you hit him with Everfrost and Gravity Field, he's going to be absolutely CC'd upon coming down from his ultimate. There's nothing you can do to avoid that CC. It just depends if your team can kill him. And then Kai'Sa, also someone who dashes in significantly. So I would say Sorks, Everfrost. Second item, absolutely, I would say, is Zhonya's. If you think you'll use the active properly. I don't think Banshees is actually a bad idea here, since they do have the Hecarim and the Blitz. Banshees actually saves you from getting blind Blitz hooked over a wall and just dead. It also saves you from getting hit by like a stray Yasuo tornado and getting ulted and deleted. And the Kai'Sas do go hybrid now. Most of the time, they'll grab a Ludens in there or Crown or something like that, or Nashers. So the Banshees MR actually will be relevant, and Hecarims do a little mixed. Mostly physical, but still mixed, and then obviously the Kennen. So I think both Banshees and Zhonya's are totally okay options here. And again, after that, you could even actually go both Zhonya's and Banshees this game since your team does have enough damage. They have a Jinx, they have a Brand, and by the way, the reason you don't go Liandry's is because you have a Brand on your team. Brands generally build Liandry's. It's not good to have 2 Liandry's on your team. You generally want to have 1 because they don't stack. So if Brand hits them with an ability and has Liandry's, and then I hit them with an ability and I have Liandry's, then it's just going to reset the ticking of the burn. It's not going to stack them on top of each other, so it's kind of wasted damage. But yeah, you have enough damage in the rest of your team here, I think, for you to look for that Everfrost, potentially even Zhonya's Banshees to just survive and just disengage with Everfrost Gravity Field and try and peel for your Jinx for the most part. I appreciate everybody watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If there's anything that you are unsure about, anything that I wasn't clear enough, or anything that you should have disagreed with that I said, please leave a comment down below. We can have a conversation about it. If there's any other content like this you want me to do, let me know about that. If you did enjoy this content, please leave a like and subscribe. It actually really helps me out. Thank you for watching, everybody. See you next time.